Rebeca Grynspan, Secretary General of UN Trade and Development. Can't think of two more important geopolitical issues right now. Let's start on trade. You've warned about growing protectionism and also rising tariffs like the one President-elect Donald Trump is suggesting could be part of his policy. Why do you see those as so problematic?
Well, I think that we are already in what we call the new low normal of growth. We are in a path of low growth, and some of the developing countries are really growing very little, and so it's very difficult really to combat poverty and inequality if you don't have sustainable growth. And part of the opportunities that the developing countries have to do with trade and investment. If trade is weak and investment is weak, what are the opportunities for growth for the developing countries? And so that is one of the main reasons why I do think that trade has to be dynamic for closing the gaps between the most vulnerable countries and the developed world.
And another hindrance to development is, of course, sovereign debt, which is off the charts right now. Have you heard anything in recent weeks, whether at World Bank or UN General Assembly, that makes you feel like there's a plan for reducing that debt?
Well, let me give you the indicator that we have been, talking about. 3.3 billion people today live in countries that spend more in servicing the debt than on education or health. So the Sustainable Development Goal, the possibility to make a better life for your people is not there because you cannot invest in the people. So we need to restructure debt. And yes, there is hope because in the Pact of the Future, in the summit, in the General Assembly of the United Nations, it was decided to ask the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, to start a process to change the debt architecture, for restructuring the debt of the countries that are in a debt distress.
And another topic at the General Assembly was overall reform. I kept hearing people say UN 2.0. What are a couple of concrete steps you're hoping the UN takes as it moves into its next 75 years?
Well, I think that in the pillar of peace and of peace building, there is a lot that has been discussed, and I think that prevention, peace building, diplomatic prevention has to be part of the package. Yes, it's not only intervention, it's prevention. And I think that there is a lot to be done and reforms that have been put forward, and also in the Security Council, in the sense of, including the continents that are excluded, that is Africa and Latin America. And thirdly, the Bretton Woods institutions. The financing architecture has to work for everybody. And I think that these three areas of reform can go a long way in closing inequalities and asymmetries in the world today.
And when you speak about the Bretton Woods organizations, of course, born out of World War II, largely designed to rebuild Europe in the wreckage of that war, help people explain why they're not functioning properly for the global South.
Well, first of all, the economy has changed. Yes, let me give you two indicators. South-South trade today is at least as much as North-North trade. This has not happened since the 18th century, okay? So it's a different trade economy. The other element, in the next 5 years, 70% of the growth will come from the global South, 70% of the growth. So we are in a multipolar world, and we have to be more flexible in terms of what we decided to do 80 years ago to be able to reform, to rethink, and to revive multilateralism.
Finally, there's a growing movement, Madam Secretary General, that the next Secretary General of the United Nations should be a woman. Let me mention, your name has been thrown out there a couple of times. Why is it important that the next leader be female?
Because we have to walk the talk. The gender parity, the parity between men and women, and the women's rights is a very important part of the UN agenda. And we haven't had a woman in 80 years. So there is no reason for that. It's not that there are not enough women that are capable. It's because the system choose men all the time. So it is time for the UN also and for the countries in the UN to walk the talk.
Rebeca Grynspan, thank you so much.
Thank you.